I am very honored here today to be joined by Gina McCarthy, who is the first National Climate Advisor, which is the President's Chief Advisor on Domestic Climate Policy. So my name is Ben Prochazka, and as part of World EV Day, the Electrification Coalition is one of the core partners for World EV Day. And it is basically a day of conversations around the globe focused on catalyzing the shift to sustainable electric transportation and engaging with consumers and businesses and government leaders to drive policy outcomes and the needed change to accelerate transportation electrification. The Electrification Coalition is a national organization that is working to accelerate the adoption of plug-in electric vehicles across the U.S. We work at the intersection of policy and implementation at the local, state, and federal level. We're very honored to work with groups like NRDC as part of the American Cities Climate Challenge. We helped coordinate and lead the Smart City Challenge on behalf of Paul G. Allen Philanthropies. We also created the Climate Mayor's EV Purchasing Collaborative and continue to work on a whole slew of policy and implementation actions across the country. But for those who are unlikely not familiar with Climate Advisor McCarthy, she was the 13th administrator of the EPA and has helped spearhead key policy actions like the Clean Power Plan and so many others, including the U.S.'s first agreement to join the Paris Climate Accord. So thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about World EV Day and some of the efforts that we need to take.
Well, Ben, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the Electrification Coalition and all the work you're doing. It's amazing, but it has to be one of the most fun jobs ever. I mean, admit it. Nothing's hard about selling EVs. They're awesome.
I feel very honored to have chosen this as a career path. And I think when I'm going to use the pun, but when I chose to plug into the issue, I had no idea how critical this was going to be and how important it was going to be for ending oil dependency and tackling climate change. So I'm really excited to be here.
You're absolutely right. Now that we know that transportation is such a big contributor, the number one sector in the U.S., all this stuff is so important. And so first of all, I hope everybody is enjoying World EV Day. Let's celebrate, the fact that we have these terrific vehicles. And the most exciting part of this, and maybe even electrifying part of this, moving another pun forward, is that these vehicles are like so high performing. They make so much sense and they can do so much good for our air quality as well as our climate challenge. So this is hugely exciting, Ben, to celebrate and to have you to celebrate with. Thanks.
Well, great. I'm so excited to talk to someone who's such an advocate, but also gets that it's also a really amazing technology. So, maybe as a first question for you, as we think about World EV Day, as you said, transportation has become the single biggest contributor to CO emissions and generates emissions that unfortunately disproportionately impact the health of disadvantaged communities. Thankfully, EVs are a scalable solution, but we need to move faster to realize the benefits. Can you highlight how the administration is working to accelerate the transition to an electrified transportation future?
Sure, because you're absolutely right. Transportation now is a significant focus of attention, really for a couple of reasons. Well, actually, a number of reasons. One of them is the fact that it's so important to our climate. But even equally importantly, it's, climate is in the end a people issue. It's a health concern. And we are, as an administration, and President Biden's been very solid on this, looking at every opportunity to tackle the challenge of climate, recognizing that it's not just a planetary issue, but is essentially an equity question as well. And you mentioned that, Ben. We know the communities that are left behind. We know those most vulnerable, the kids with asthma attacks, and how many more asthma attacks we see in kids of color and in poor families, because we know that they're facing significant air pollution, much of which is related to the burning of fossil fuels in our vehicles. So the exciting thing about today is that I don't spend a lot of time dealing with climate deniers. We can see climate change happening in front of our eyes. But the great thing is that we have solutions to these things that actually are terrific. We know the future of vehicles is electric. There is no question about it. And I know it not just because I think I'm really smart and President Biden said so. I know it because every automaker that we deal with is saying exactly the same thing, because we know they're high performing. We know how clean they are. We know how important it is, most importantly in our rural communities where we have some extreme poverty, or in our urban areas. These are core communities that need these investments, that need the clean air and need to be able to get around. And so even your backdrop is one of the biggest messages that I think we have to give, that it's not just about passenger vehicles. It is about what we do with our buses, our transit buses, so folks can get around. And this administration is focused very, very heavily, I think, Ben, as you know, on bringing the automakers together, on standing on the South Lawn with the President of the United States and the United Auto Workers, because this is a time to celebrate the future, because it's now. We can make these things happen and grow jobs and build our economy. It's just in a moment in time when it's no sacrifice. It is pure opportunity.
Well, I'm rarely matched in enthusiasm for EVs, but I think you're eclipsing it at this point, which I'm so excited about. But with, as you even discussed this, but there's more than 50 EV models available. It's hitting the medium duty, heavy duty market, buses, trucks. It's kind of everything across the board. But it's going to take a major investment in smart policies at the local, state, and federal level, right? And the administration has made electrification a significant priority, and you just talked about that. And Congress right now is negotiating a critical part of the investments in the future through the bipartisan infrastructure deal, and kind of creates a down payment on our electrified transportation future. How do you view this bipartisan infrastructure deal as that key investment that we need to make?
Well, Ben, it's really important, because right now we're focused on, and the announcement we made was that we want to make sure that we are achieving 50% of our car sales being EV by 2030. And that gets us on a great trajectory to actually achieve even potentially 100% in 2035, which I think is doable. But we're starting out with redoing some of the regulations that were weakened by the prior administration. We're doing it by getting together with the car automakers as well as the UAW, and really making the commitment to move forward with regulations and with their efforts to actually build these vehicles in the United States and those batteries. And how do we advance that? And so one of the ways we've done it is we've already identified some resources that can get behind this, even without our Build Back Better plan or a bipartisan infrastructure deal. And that's to the tune of Commerce finding $3 billion in the American Rescue Plan that we can actually use to advance the domestic EV industry. But in our Build Back Better plans, we are talking about $170 billion of investment in the auto sector and moving the EVs forward. And that's everything from building electric vehicle charging stations so that people can have that question erased out of their mind about whether they can go someplace and get back. We know we have to do more there. We're looking at a goal of 500,000 charging stations that we can add, and we're going to be working with the business sector to move that forward. We're looking at zero emission buses. We're looking at not just the transit vehicles that you see behind you, but those yellow school buses don't have to be dirty anymore. We can keep our kids' lungs protected. We're talking about $6 billion in investments in battery manufacturing and processing, because we want to build it here in the United States. We have to be with the Union of Auto Workers and recognize that the future is not just going to be a cleaner bus fleet or auto fleet. It's going to be about growing good union jobs, because we certainly need both. So we're excited about the massive kind of down payment we can make now, because we want the United States to be a leader in this again. We were, and we're going to be again.
I think you really nailed it with a part of this where, we're seeing significant commitments from OEMs, countries, the private sector, subnationals, and even going so far as to phase out the production of the internal combustion engine. And that's a big
Yeah.
deal. And it's no longer a question of if, but when. How do we make sure the U.S. positions itself to ensure we're not only drive electric, but we're leading the manufacturing and bringing auto jobs back to the U.S. as we electrify our transportation sector?
Well, we have to, we're looking at a number of different ways to do it out of that 170 billion. We're looking at grants. We're looking at tax credits. We're looking at loan guarantee options. We're looking at really getting behind this in a way where the rest of the world can see that the United States is back again in this climate fight. Ben, it's been, sitting on the sidelines prior to this administration. It's been kind of embarrassing. Not kind of. It's been troubling to see the direction that the country was heading, but it's not there anymore, Ben. But we do have to get the investment out of the folks in Congress. We need to work together. The president proved with the bipartisan infrastructure deal that we could work across the aisle and recognize that we need to invest in our country again. And part of that investment is capturing this future, is rebuilding our manufacturing, advancing good jobs, and making people feel hopeful and good about the challenges we're facing, that we're capable and willing to drive the international world again in a direction in which we can really provide our kids with a much healthier and stable future. So this is a huge opportunity at a moment in time that we cannot lose. We cannot pass this up.
You speak about the sort of once in a generational opportunity, and I have two children, and one of my children probably will never go to a gas station. And we just drove almost 4,000 miles across the country in an EV, and I think helps demonstrate the walk and the talk. But the federal government also, through an EO earlier in April, has committed to really rapidly transitioning federal fleets. And so, how is the administration planning to increase electrification of the U.S. fleet, and what are some of the barriers and opportunities we keep facing to meet that kind of ambitious goal?
Well, we have significant resources tied up in this effort to really be sustainable as a federal government. And it's going to be hugely important that we succeed. We are looking at actually challenging ourselves to get to zero emission fleets as quickly as possible. So we've developed a sustainability plan. And that plan is really about starting this purchasing period, which is in October, to start making that transition. We start from a very low baseline, and we have real challenges, but we're committed to do it. We have to put, our own purchasing where we're trying to convince everybody to invest. It's probably less a question of convincing people now. I don't know if you saw the picture of President Biden at the driving an F-150. He was just enthralled by it, and he just drove a Jeep the other day, and it's just this is an opportunity for us now to tell the across the federal government, our agencies, that we have to meet the president's commitment in our own house, not just advertise how good it is to everybody else. So it's a terrific opportunity for us, I think, to direct our fleet, which happens to be, I think, the second largest in the world, our vehicle fleet. And we're going to start making that shift, and we're doing it now. We've already tripled from our small baseline, but that's not anything to brag about, but we'll get there.
Well, I know that the Electrification Coalition is going to be right next to you all in partnership, working with cities and states and tribal fleets and others to meet that ambitious goal. And I think fleets represent an opportunity to really demonstrate the proof of concept, but they also, total cost of ownership shows that we're going to save money in addition to reducing climate emissions. So I know we're short on time. So maybe just my last question as we wrap up is just how can we ensure that this transition can not only support climate reduction goals, but also reduces pollution impacts on historically disproportionately affected communities?
Well, President Biden, right out of the gate, didn't just join the Paris Agreement. He also made a commitment that the climate and clean energy investments that we were going to make, and as you can see from a $170 billion price tag just in the EV marketplace, it's significant, that they're going to go to the communities left behind. We know there are communities that have been disinvested in, and those communities tend to face disproportionate environmental impacts, not just from climate, but traditional pollutants. So we are going to make sure that we go first and foremost to those communities and do things like you're showing in your background, is bring them the kind of vehicles that allow them to get out, bring the kind of jobs that allow them to participate in this new revolution in the future that we're creating together. And hopefully that will show them that America is back, not just for the wealthy, but to rebuild our democracy from the middle out. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look for those union and high-paying jobs. We're going to look to invest in our manufacturing again, put people back to work, and get them around in the cleanest vehicles ever, which is what you're all about, Ben. And the Electrification Coalition is going to help us every step of the way.
Well, Climate Advisor McCarthy, it has been a pleasure to speak with you as part of World EV Day. I think part of the way that we're going to have a global response to this is with leadership like yours in the administration, but also working with Congress, governors across the country, mayors and corporate leaders. And I'm very excited to be on this transportation journey. I hope we all plug in and accelerate the future of transportation. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks so much, Ben. Appreciate it.